Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam, and welcome to Let It Rip. We're coming to you from the CUNY TV studios in the shadow of the Empire State Building in New York City. We begin a new season of Let It Rip, and it promises to be a very busy one. The midterm elections are looming large, but before we get to that, there's so much that happened over the summer that we need to discuss. There's the arrest of WNBA star Brittney Griner and the investigations into former President Donald Trump. We'll talk about that. And a little bit later, we'll also have music from neo-soul singer Rob Claude performing his song, Little Black Boy. But first, all of the investigations surrounding the former president. Where do we start? There are so many, and possibly some that we don't even know about yet. Here to help us delve into all of these very important topics, we have two guests who come to this with a wealth of experience in New York City politics. Civil liberties attorney and the former executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, and a former candidate for public advocate Norman Siegel, and the former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party and the newly appointed director of the Public Policy Program at Hunter College's Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute, Basil Smikle. This is Let It Rip. Basil, let's start with you. A few months back, Democrats were in deep trouble. Biden's approval ratings low, gas prices high, inflation affecting everyone, and his policies stalled by two Democratic senators. But seemingly overnight, a lot has changed. Has it been enough to give Democrats a chance of retaining the House and maybe picking up a few Senate seats?
Sure, I think there is some momentum behind Democrats right now, but it's important to note that there should be an arc to that narrative. On the one hand, Democrats can point to what's happening with Donald Trump and the raids on his Mar-a-Lago mansion and the FBI, those ongoing investigations. That's important to give voters a sense of why they perhaps should not vote for Republicans. But it has to be also positive on the Democratic argument. Biden and the Democrats have to argue that they've worked to bring gas prices down, and they have gone down, that this bill, which was recently signed, could address issues of inflation and help to bring prices down, but also offset that with some benefits through subsidies for electric cars, for cleaner fuel, the reduction in prescription drug prices, subsidies for healthcare. So there's a lot in the bill. When you add that to the infrastructure bill that was passed some time ago, where it looked like Biden wasn't able to move the needle, I think they can argue that the needle has moved. But there have to be an arc to that narrative. Why you shouldn't vote for Republicans, but why you should vote for Democrats. Both of those things have to be in play.
Okay, we're going to come back to that a little bit more in just a bit. But Norman, what is your take on that?
I agree with Basil. Let me add another dynamic. The last week of the Supreme Court term for us progressives, for liberals, moderates, was very frightening. You started off with a bad decision at the EPA about climate change, restricting the EPA from doing certain things. You had the separation of church and state with a case up in Maine. They even tinkered with the Miranda warning. But the most important one is the Dobbs decision out of Mississippi with regard to women's right to choice, with regard to abortion, overturning Roe versus Wade. Not just women, but men as well, all across America, understand the fundamental change after 50 years. That's a fundamental issue. I think a lot of those folks, especially the women in suburbs, even Republican women, we saw what happened in Kansas recently. I think that's going to be a major factor. The second, Basil is absolutely right. With all the investigations about Trump, also Trump's out on the campaign trail already. He's talked about a half a dozen things he's going to do if he ever gets back in the White House in 2024. That would scare the hell out of a lot of people. He's talking about death penalty to drug dealers. He's talking about taking homeless people out of the urban areas. I never thought he cared about urban areas, but he wants to put them all somewhere in unvaluable real estate and create tents, sort of like concentration camps for homeless people. So stuff like that, get rid of DOE, the Federal Education Agency, onward and onward. So I think that contrary to history, we have a chance now where if I was advising the Democrats, Basil, you should advise them, make this a choice decision. Are you for democracy the way we know it in America, or you want to go to an autocratic, authoritarian government? And folks, that's not the America we grew up in. It's your choice come November.
Why do you think that all of this, the stuff that he comes up with, resonates with voters so much? Is it that they want a strong man?
Well, I think, speaking as a white guy, I don't need to go to Harlem and speak anymore. I don't have to go to the South Bronx and talk to the Latino community. People like me got to go into those white working class neighborhoods where I came from and talk to folks and say to them, look, you've got legitimate grievances, but people of color and women and immigrants, they're not taking over your jobs. Don't be threatened by that. That's what America's all about. You've benefited, you still can benefit. But the person that you're putting your trust in, that's not where you should put in your trust in. And if we can bring over 10, 15% of those folks who voted for him again, that's the difference.
Basil, Liz Cheney's been an outspoken critic of Donald Trump, and it cost her job. She lost her primary. Is that a signal of things that are on the horizon?
Well, it's a signal of things that have already happened. You had a lot of members of Congress, senators, folks running statewide office across the country that have found a way to either align themselves with Donald Trump or give him a strong embrace. And he's been, he's had some success, not across the board, but he's had enough success to give him fuel and energy to say to his supporters and his voters that his point of view, his way of thinking is the way the country should go. And look, he is the current standard bearer of the Republican Party. Like it or not, he is. And, there are a lot of people that are still going to be very supportive of his message and are going to do what he says. So we should consistently be concerned and vigilant about his influence on the party. So having said that, Liz Cheney, yes, she lost her election because she decided to part from Trump and make that break, and it was very public, obviously, with respect to impeachment on the January 6th hearings. There's going to be much more of that to come, and we should be consistently prepared for that. But it's not just the federal elections, it's also the state election.
Let me ask you a question about that, though. He has managed to install a lot of election deniers across the country in state and local office. Has he basically wrapped up 2024 by doing that?
No, he hasn't at all. But I do think it's important for us to focus, for those that care, to focus on every seat that can be contested. For example, most people, when you ask them, don't know what the Secretary of State does in their state. But that individual has an extraordinarily important role in determining how and when elections are conducted. There are, I think, over 24 states in the country where that person is elected and not appointed by the governor. And for the first time, because of the controversies around electors and election fraud, and we see an investigation in Georgia that is very significant on this particular issue. We're seeing in Michigan the same thing, that there are secretaries of state that are elected where Trump is supporting individuals who also support his view of what happened in 2020. And so what has happened is, number one, it's awakened all of us to a civics lesson that I don't know that you could have ever gotten in a classroom. And number two, it's made us aware of the number of offices that we actually need to pay attention to that are generally on the ballot, but we kind of just write off as being inconsequential. We now have to remember that these offices are consequential because they have such an important effect on our democracy and our policy.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Joe Biden's accomplishments. He had quite an August where he accomplished a lot of different things. A number of things were passed. But I'm not so sure that it really all resonated with the public because it happened while people were on vacation. It was in the summer. Did it resonate, or is there a messaging problem?
No, I don't think it resonated. And let's go recently. Biden, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, remember, he had 50 Dems and 50 Republicans. In order to pull that off, that's a major accomplishment. Schumer, I mentioned, from West Virginia, they kept working on it. Is it perfect? Hell no. But it is very significant. So what happened? August the 8th, there's a raid in Mar-a-Lago. So instead of being on the front page of the New York Times and the Daily News, Biden, he's on page 12 or 14. And even finally, they're getting him, since when he signed the bill, he got some press. But that's the cycle of media. It's Trump. If you want to give him any credit, which I don't want to give him any credit, but if you have to acknowledge credit, he knows how to manipulate and cultivate the media and social media. And so Biden, in my opinion, is getting a raw deal, because I think, considering what he had to deal with in Congress, he's done a pretty good job. But a lot of us thought that he was transitional, not transformation, as some people talk about. I thought, when I supported Joe Biden, he was the person who only could beat Trump in 2020. I didn't necessarily want him to be the candidate in 2024. So that's a discussion that Democrats must have and have to resolve relatively quickly.
That's big, but let me go to the midterms now. What's going to happen there?
Well, it's crucial. Hopefully, because of what Basil and I had said previously, we have to not only retain the House, but we've got to increase so that we don't have 50-50 in the Senate. And it's not just because of Democrats and Republicans, it's because of ideological reasons, policy reasons, constitutional issues. It's very clear the MAGA Republicans are not in favor of the rule of law and constitutional provisions that America was founded on. Was it founded on perfectly? No. But we've been moving to a more perfect union. Freedom, equality, justice for all, not just some. That's an arduous journey. We have to continue that journey. The MAGA Republicans, led by Trump, they want to turn the clock back to those 50s. They want women in the kitchen. They want gays in the closet. And we can't allow any of them to be put back 75 years ago. That's what this is about, America.
Yeah. Basil, let me ask you, what do you think is going to happen with the midterms? How's this going to affect them?
Well, owing to everything that we said before, what's happened in the Supreme Court, the bill, what I think is Democratic unanimity around the messaging to take back to the districts, I do think Democrats have a good shot at keeping majorities in the House and the Senate. We may lose some in the House, but maybe we can pick up one or two in the Senate. Who knows what's going to happen in Pennsylvania, or Dr. Oz running, another, sort of somebody that has embraced Trump quite, as well. So listen, I do think the future is a lot brighter for Democrats than it was maybe a month, 2 months ago.
Okay, that's going to have to be the last word for today, but we will revisit a lot of this in the days and months to come. I want to thank our guests, civil liberties attorney Norman Siegel, and the former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party, Basil Smikle. Thank you to both of you. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the Brittney Griner case and the criminalization of cannabis in the U.S. and around the world. We'll also have music from Rob Clove, who will perform his song, Little Black Boy. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. The arrest and imprisonment of WNBA star Brittney Griner for essentially pot possession in Russia has been a hotly debated topic for months. Griner, who played in Russia during the WNBA's offseason to earn extra cash, was arrested for possessing cannabis oil in her luggage. She and her attorney say that she had a medical prescription for the drug, and in many states here in the U.S., the oil is legal. Still, she was tried and convicted and sentenced to 9 years in prison. 9 years! Tanya Osborne is the communications director for Women Grow. It's an organization that focuses on female leadership in the cannabis industry. And Trecca McMillan is a former WNBA assistant coach. Welcome to both of you. Tanya, I think a lot of people would say, geez, this is excessive, you know? I mean, do you think there's more at work here?
It speaks to many things about the treatment of women. It speaks to the treatment of cannabis and the legalization, obviously. And I don't think I should speak from the political vantage point, but I feel it is incredibly excessive as to what's happening to Ms. Griner right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that these laws that we have both in the United States and globally need a serious look at this point, though?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know the laws of Russia. Clearly, they are not cannabis friendly, but there are countries outside of the United States that are doing cannabis research and have not so strict policies around cannabis. And maybe we should expand that.
I think Amsterdam.
Israel has a really wonderful, not only research, but the way that they embrace cannabis as medicine.
Mm-hmm. Trecca, what about this whole notion of women in sports having to play overseas to earn a living?
Yes, it's incredible that the sport they love to play and their livelihood cannot make enough money in the country that they have to have that option to choose to go over to another country. And many of the women in the WNBA in their off season, because the WNBA season is so shortened, they choose to go to other countries.
How do you fix that, though?
It's not an easy fix. A lot of it has to do with money and sponsorships and giving more opportunities for women to even opportunities now for them to play. There's not as many opportunities. So the league is trying to work on expanding the number of teams to create more opportunities, but it comes down to funding and money and resources.
Yeah, because I hate to say it, but I don't hear a lot of people really support the WNBA, like where everybody gets together for a Super Bowl party. When it's time for a championship for the WNBA, I don't hear anybody talking about it. So how do you get that more into the consciousness of the country so that in fact you have those dollars come in so that you can pay those salaries?
It's not on TV as much, and so that's where a lot of the revenue comes from, is TV dollars. The regular season is very, very little on TV. Tonight the games are going to be on ESPN and ESPN2, but you just don't see the revenue dollars, and that's where a lot of the money comes from is TV dollars. And so the grassroots of it is being able to get them more exposure on TV, so that we can begin to get more dollars for the WNBA and for the players, so they don't have to choose to go overseas and play.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a reason why it doesn't resonate, why the WNBA doesn't resonate?
It's hard to say why it doesn't resonate. I know during the regular season of basketball season, it's hard to find facilities to because you're combating the NFL and college sports, and so you're trying to find the perfect time for them to play so that you can get those opportunities to get more revenue dollars in. In the summertime, it's a tough time for them to play, but it's even tougher in the wintertime.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I want to get your thoughts on a couple of things real quick here. What do you think should happen with Britney?
I think she should be allowed to come home. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there's any debate. She should not be a political prisoner. And based on what she's said, it was a mistake. She didn't intend it to be in her bag. I don't think she was treated correctly. They said she didn't have the accurate translation services available to her. There's so many factors, and the details are whatever details we receive. But it does speak to the larger thing about she's a medical patient. So we should have conversations around people using cannabis as medicine internationally. I mean, it's a big thing. But we talked earlier about money being diverted to the NBA. They spend a lot of money in marketing. Maybe some of that money can be diverted to the women's league so they aren't forced to go to other countries where they're more at risk, and there's so many things there. Cannabis legalization, cannabis as medicine is a larger conversation that we really need to have.
Trecca, should there be some wiggle room there for athletes that are using this for pain?
Definitely. I mean, you're performing your bodies, and they've played for such a long time by the time they get to the WNBA. So your bodies have taken a toll, and there should be some allowance for for cannabis use for medicinal purposes for pain. And she definitely needs to be able to come home. I mean, she's played in Russia for 6 or 7 years, so she's been there. It's not like they didn't know who she was, because she has been playing overseas in Russia, particularly for years. So this is it's such a farce that she is in the place that she's in right now.
Okay. Tanya, when we talk about like marijuana or cannabis for medical purposes,
Right.
are there particular strains that need to be used or that can be used that could be separate from the others as far as that is concerned? Where do we go with that?
So there are strain-specific remedies that are better at addressing particular conditions than other. From my vantage point, all cannabis use, I say 95% of it, is medical. You might not fit under the qualifying conditions for your state, but a lot of cannabis consumption is medical. So we can talk about sativas and hybrids, and we could talk about different strains and THC potencies, CBD versus THC, but the arching thing here is that a lot of folks use cannabis as medicine, whether it be for sleep or for anxiety or for pain or for recovery. There's so many medical applications. It really just goes beyond strain specificity and indica hybrid conversation. That's when you go shopping, but when you use cannabis as medicine, it works for your body. And unlike, typical opiates, when you take it, you're going to have a result. We don't know what the results is going to be. Brittany might have found a strain that worked really good for her. It came in an oil, so she wasn't combusting. That's a whole other way. She's using it medicinally. You know what I mean? So we just have to learn and open up our minds to this notion of taking away the stoner mentality and realizing that there's a huge medicinal purpose for cannabis and we need to look at it.
Okay. Well, we have no control over the laws of other countries, but it sure seems like maybe there needs to be some uniformity around cannabis laws and regulations around the world, and certainly here in the U.S. But with the fractured political scene, I'm not so sure that that can happen soon. We'll see. A good conversation. I want to thank our guest, Tanya Osborne, the Communications Director for Women Grow, an organization that focuses on female leadership in the cannabis industry, and Trecca McMillan, a former WNBA assistant coach. Thank you both. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, a little music from Rob Clove. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. There are some other developments that I want to mention. In August, 4 current and former officers were charged with federal crimes in the raid that killed Breonna Taylor. The 26-year-old was shot and killed by police who carried out a no-knock warrant and stormed her home while she was sleeping with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend fired 1 shot, believing the cops were intruders. The officers responded by firing 22 shots and killing Taylor with a shot to the chest. According to charging documents in the case, 3 of the officers lied to obtain a warrant. During a news conference, Attorney General Merrick Garland said that violated Breonna Taylor's civil rights, leading to her death. On another front, we've now learned the federal sentences the killers of Ahmaud Arbery will serve in addition to their state sentences. The men, Gregory and Travis McMichael, who were convicted in the killing, were sentenced to life in prison for their hate crimes convictions. A third man, their neighbor, William Roddy Bryant Jr., was sentenced to 35 years that'll be served at the same time as his state sentence. All 3 were already serving life sentences on the state charges related to the killing of the 25-year-old black man. For their families, both Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery are forever gone, taken far too soon. It's a mother's worst nightmare, and something our next guest focuses on in his song, Little Black Boy. Here's neo-soul artist Rob Clove. I'm Mike Gilliam. We'll see you next time on Let It Rip.
Little black child, where you going with your hair so low? Your mama's gonna be looking for you soon. Oh yeah. Said little black child, only thing you can find alone by yourself is home. I know you're strong, but they, whoa, they don't see it like that. Well, please make it back home. I know it seems so small, but you'd be surprised. They say that's just the way it is. Well, know that you are loved. Said little black child, you're too young to truly see it all right now. There's a system against you with no walls to keep